We are live.
Hello and welcome to the International Conference Building Human Solidarity in the Light of Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti. This is a workshop of the Hub of the Americas. My name is Susan Gunn. I'm the director of the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns based in Washington, D.C. I represent Catholic missionaries known as Maryknoll Missioners, serving in more than 20 countries around the world. The work of my staff in Washington, D.C. and at the UN in New York is to bring to policymakers the wisdom and the experience of Maryknoll missioners in their communities who are often struggling to survive in systems that perpetuate poverty, persecution, and violence. As a Catholic, I'm called to protect life and promote a world where life with dignity can flourish for all. And for that, we need to listen and dialogue with people across all spectrums of society to help us see and understand unjust systems in which we live. And that is what brings me to this conversation today, and I hope you as well. The topic for our 2-hour discussion is seeing the structures of racism and building solidarity in the United States. I want to welcome and introduce our 4 speakers joining us today. First, we have Ellen Mahli, a human rights advocate in Fargo, North Dakota. She received a master's degree in nursing from the University of Minnesota. Ellen is a former Maryknoll sister who served overseas in medical clinics in the Peruvian Andes. And in the United States, she served as the first clinical nurse specialist employed at St. Luke's Hospital in North Dakota. She went on to hold clinical management and educational roles in the healthcare system, universities, and the community over the years. Ellen has a passion to serve the most vulnerable people in her community. She currently serves as a board member for the Fargo-Moorhead Interfaith Center, and Ellen received the Fargo-Moorhead Martin Luther King Award in 2019. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
Also, after Ellen, we'll hear from Simone Grudzen, the founder of Crown Shine Studios. Simone has been making documentary films for about 20 years. As a director and producer, she brings a multi-layered approach to visual storytelling. She has a passion for curating video content that makes people want to act. She studied film at the University of Southern California and New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, where she earned a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in film and TV production. Over the past decade, Simone has created content that can be found on TV, YouTube, and every major on-demand platform. She's created video content for creative entrepreneurs, pioneering healthcare companies, academic research institutions, social justice nonprofits, including Black Voters Matter. Her favorite clients are those who desire to change the world, one story at a time. Welcome, Simone.
Thank you so much.
After Simone, we'll hear from Sam Ho, currently the Director of Communications and Community Relations and Diversity at the San Jose Evergreen Community College District. Working with key leaders at the district for the past 20 plus years, he initiated and championed many diversity efforts, which resulted in significant increase in diverse representation at the leadership, professional, and faculty levels. Sam earned an MBA in management in California and a BA in psychology in New York. He also serves as co-chair of the district's EEO and Diversity Advisory Committee. Welcome to you, Sam.
Thank you very much.
And we'll also hear from Nate Tinner-Williams, my neighbor in Washington, D.C. Nate is a journalist and news seminarian, originally from New Orleans. He's co-founder and editor of Black Catholic Messenger, an online media publication founded in 2020, which seeks to amplify African-American Catholic voices and stories. He's slated to begin studies this fall semester to become a Catholic priest with the Josephites and currently studies grad level theology at the Institute for Black Catholic Studies. Welcome to you, Nate.
Thank you very much.
So each of our speakers will have about 20 minutes to share and about their life experience and also share their screen for any resources they want us to see. Before we begin, I want to say something about Pope Francis's latest teaching on peace called Fratelli Tutti. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis names social structures that divide us and calls all of us to be like the Good Samaritan, valuing love for neighbor above all, working to build solidarity across race, religion, and economic lines, something many people often refer to as the beloved community, I think. And with that in mind, I would like to invite each of our speakers to answer 2 questions in their presentation. And this isn't a surprise. I did share this with them earlier. And of course, they're welcome to expound beyond. But number 1, how have you and your community been impacted by structures of racism in the United States? And number 2, how do you work to dismantle these structures and build solidarity in your community? You see that we have representatives from community health, education, media, and religious sectors of our society. So welcome to you all. And I'm going to turn over first to Ellen to speak from her experience.
Thank you. Let's see. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you. And I will be talking about my experiences with healing our city and also my activities regarding the Native American boarding schools. George Floyd was an American man, an Afro-American man in Minneapolis who was murdered by a police officer during an arrest at a store that the clerk suspected that he used a counterfeit $20 bill. Derek Chauvin was one of the 4 officers who arrived on the scene, and he knelt on George's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds until George died. And that was in May of 2020. After George's death, thousands of people took to the streets to demand an end of police brutality and racism. Now, Minneapolis is a town where I had worked. I grew up, and I'm in Fargo now, about 250 miles from Minneapolis, but I'm still very involved in some of the activities there. After this brutality and racism, there was also a devastation with the coronavirus pandemic, which has disproportionately affected our African Americans, our Native Americans, and many other groups as well. I believe that the storm of riots, the looting, and the arson in Minneapolis was not just about one incident, but really about the systemic nature of racism throughout our country that creates disparities. Disparities in criminal justice and employment and housing and healthcare and politics, education, and many more. After George's death, there were other cities, including our own, who responded by having Black Lives Matter marches, rallies. We had many events in our town because we also witnessed the injustices of racial inequality and the oppression that we had. The indigenous people of Fargo, of course, were very active in all of these activities, but they also went down to Minneapolis with their dingle dancers. And they went to the sacred spot where George was murdered, and they danced for justice and peace and healing. I also had an opportunity to go down there and to spend an afternoon with my 2 sisters and my 12-year-old granddaughter at the site where George Floyd had lived and he had died. We walked the streets, we prayed, we visited with many people who live in that community, and it was a very sacred experience that I will always remember. After George had died, there was an escalation of chaos and violent crimes in Minneapolis and the surrounding area. And there was an African-American couple, Don and Sandra Samuels, and several other leaders in North Minneapolis who put up a tent, and they wanted to create a daily space for prayer so that people could come together. And so they came together for healing our city. For 30 days, the people who lived near Broadway and Bryan Avenue came together, and they were praying for healing our city. They prayed in silence, they grieved their losses, and they were praying for a better future. After these 30 days of physically praying together, it was decided to launch a Healing Our City virtual prayer tent. And that started last March. And I was just so happy when I heard about the virtual prayer tent, because living a distance from Minneapolis, I couldn't be at the other tent. So I was very excited. I informed our Interfaith Board and our peace and justice groups and many others who could give them an opportunity to start our day with prayer with people of many races and many faiths. So we then, the news about the prayer tent really traveled, and soon there were between 350 to 400, then 500 people who joined us from around the country, and some of them from outside of our country. And they had joined us through Facebook and Zoom. So the people in our virtual prayer tent met every morning. We met every morning at 8 o'clock. We had a short reflection from a different religious or spiritual leader every day. And then we followed the reflection by silent prayer for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And that was the length of time that Derek Chauvin had his knee on George's neck until he died. We then listened to a piece of music, and we continued on with our day. Being part of this virtual prayer tent was very meaningful for me. It was a great way to start a day in prayer, praying with people who were from all over the world. Our prayer tent was very expansive, and it was inclusive, and all were welcomed. And it couldn't have been done by one person alone. I felt that we really became a community. And the original virtual prayer tent, when it was started, it was going to last until the trial was over, because we had those trials in Minneapolis. But I think that so many good things came out of it, and I haven't talked with Sandra or Don lately. But in conclusion, I can say for myself, it was a great blessing in my life. And I continue to pray for all those who were in our tent, wherever they may be. And I have certainly increased my actions for equity and human rights for all. As far as the Native American boarding schools, I will now talk about them because I have been passionate about working with Indigenous people for many years, and had a great privilege of being with the Aymara Indians in the Altiplano of Peru. And so many times I go back, and a lot of things that I've learned from them. And so I feel that they are very present in the work that I do here in our North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Minnesota. So I will just share a small part of this issue that I've been involved with for the last 40 years in this city. During my years as a clinical nurse specialist, an ethics consultant, a manager of 6 services in our health system, and membership of several community boards, I have been very blessed to have opportunities to listen to stories, to have indigenous mentors. I've been so happy to be an advocate, not only in the health systems in our area, but but also in our community, in our state, and beyond. I've had the privilege of attending powwows, sweat lodges, vision quests, ceremonies for our missing and murdered Indigenous women, and many more opportunities, and I just appreciate them so much. I especially appreciated having worked on Standing Rock Reservation on 4 different times. There were 171 tribes represented there, and I spent quite a bit of time out on that reservation, and as we tried to protect our sacred burial grounds and our water from the oil pipes. And today, right now, as we're speaking, and not far from here, 150 miles, Minnesota is in the battle to protect Mother Earth on line 3. That would be another presentation, but I've already heard from 3 people who are there, and a journalist has been arrested, and my friend who's a pastor of the United Church of Christ has been arrested. And so we will be continuing to be active in that, with that group as well, as they're trying to protect their water from the pipes and the earth. And certainly you need to protect the earth in order to protect the people. But very, very close friends who are involved in that right now. And so I'm going to get back now to the Native American boarding schools. They were started in the 19th century, and they continued on into the 1970s in the United States and into the 1990s in Canada. The purpose of these schools was to assimilate and civilize Native children into a Euro-American culture. The mission was to take the Indian out of the child, And it really was a cultural genocide. The governments of Canada and the United States paid for the schools. They were staffed by European Christian missionaries of various denominations. Majority of the missionaries were Catholics. However, there were other denominations, and I've tried to explain that kind of to some of our people here, because they're only familiar with what happened within our region. But there were missionaries also who from representing the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Episcopalians, definitely the Anglicans, the United Church of Christ, and others. Children were taken by force from their families on the reservation by soldiers, and then they were taken to a boarding school, or they were put on a train to travel days and nights to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Now, Carlisle, Pennsylvania is 1,300 miles from here. And so they were on the train for at least 3 days and three nights, the children were. And so people have shared the stories, and I know several people who were on those trains. And another thing I wanted to explain, that when the soldiers would come to the reservation, there was a fellow, I served for several terms on our shelter here, our homeless shelter. and we started a program in the evenings in the winter to take in the people into our sheltering churches so that we could shelter people from dying in the cold. And I would usually take a shift with my son, Dan. We would take the we take the 8 o'clock shift to the 3 o'clock shift at night. So during that time, I heard a lot of stories. One man was telling me about the reservation he was on and how there was a man who would blow a whistle. And when he saw the troops coming to get the children, that gave the families time to run into the woods, to hide their children in a ditch. There were all kinds of ways that they would hide them in the ground some way, but they provide some oxygen for them until the troops left. Some of the things I wouldn't even explain here that happened on those reservations, trying to detach these children from their families. So the children then were taken to the boarding school. And now we don't even know exactly how many boarding schools there were. We just found out about another one last week. The United States does not have very good records on this compared to Canada, because in Canada, they have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission who have done a lot of research and continuing to do research. And we also need to do more research in order to know the truth of what happened. But they had 150,000, they estimate, who were in boarding schools in Canada. And so these children would go to these schools. They would cut their hair, change their clothes. If they spoke in their native language, they would usually get their mouth washed out with soap. And not only that, but they were given another name. And I remember one time at the hospital, the nurses were having difficulty with a patient, and they consulted me to come and help in developing a care plan for a patient. His name was Iggy. And I saw him, I made a point to see him every single day, if not more frequently, because we were really able to have one really good relationship. And he also had shared many things with me. But one day I asked him, Iggy, what kind of a name is Iggy? That doesn't sound like a native name. He said, no, because I'm Ignatius. and he said, that's my name. And so that was the Christian name he was given. And I said, well, what name would you like me to call you? He said, call me Iggy. So anyway, he was one of my teachers for sure. But anyway, the schools were harsh. If there were tears or signs of lonesomeness, children were put into a dark closet, a dungeon, or a guardhouse. There was also in many of the schools sexual and mental abuse. There was poor nutrition. I've heard from many about the hunger that they experienced during that time. And also the healthcare was very poor. And it sure is, it still is, because the healthcare was so poor. Many times they would bring their people to our health system. And because we were dealing with a lot of ethical issues, I was chief and quite a few people who were from that reservation. And so then many children did die, and when they did die, this was never communicated back to the reservation or their families. So families didn't know. The people have told me too, a lot of this is coming out not frequently, but they're saying how hard it was to return to the reservation after they graduated from the school. And so many of the current problems they're having now is because of the historical trauma that these people experience. Even today out at Fort Totten, the experiences, I've gotten 2 phone calls. But anyway, about 6 weeks ago, I received a call from the president of our Interfaith board informing me that there were several Indigenous people who had called her and wanted to have a meeting the next morning at 10 o'clock. And would I be there? Because they'd asked that I be there. And I said, of course, I'd be there at any time, day or night. But anyway, they wanted to talk about the boarding schools. And so it was at that time when we were getting all that information from Canada about the way they were finding the remains of these children who were buried. And it just seems like with that information coming in, and believe me, there'll be a lot more, and it's not going to be from Canada. We will be getting a lot more information as well. And the people that met with us were saying that their wounds have been torn open and they are in pain. And one woman said, "We're alone. Do you see, we're alone? Where are the churches?" And I reassured them, because of my involvement for many years with our Interfaith board. I reassured them I would be able to get the churches, the temple, someone from the temple, the mosque, Hindu, Baha'i, Buddhist, atheist. I said we would be able to do that. And one man said, "Fine." He said, "Because I've been telling my story so long, but nobody has ever heard me." So then we decided that we were going to, our small group, that we would have a larger group. So we arranged to meet at the Indigenous Association building. And I'll tell you, people just poured out to be with us and to be part of healing, or whatever it took to help our people here. So there were 3 legislators, all close friends of mine, that came. And we had several people from our universities, and then a Lutheran bishop came. In fact, the Lutheran bishops have been so supportive. They're sending out letters this week to all their parishioners about what has happened, because people in this area have no idea what our history is. And unless we know the truth about our history, how are we going to heal? And our legislature has denied a friend of mine, Ruth Buffalo, from a bill that she had. They voted down a bill about truth, about the truth, telling the truth about our own history in our state. So that is kind of like what we're dealing with. But last Saturday, so then we came together as a group, and they really wanted to start out with the smudging service, and there's been a lot of sharing. I think we have a wonderful community that's developing. I see that there's been a lot of trust. Last Saturday, we had an Indigenous peoples community picnic, and many people came, and we had the Indian tacos, and we had wonderful food. We had drummers, dancers, and many activities that I volunteered, of course, to work at. And I also volunteered my 14-year-old grandson, who actually had a wonderful time, and he wants to go to the next powwow with me. So it was a beautiful day. And they also want to celebrate, as well as try to deal with the trauma that I've just mentioned. We're working together also on Indigenous Peoples Day. And 6 years ago, both Native and non-Native people, we all worked together. And we no longer celebrate Columbus Day in Fargo. We celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, which is really wonderful. We really make a day of it for education and for celebration. And I used to always take a vacation day on Columbus Day, and I would go to a sweat. I would be with the people, and what we did really was we would pray and we would fast on that day on Columbus Day. But now it's different. It's been different for 6 years in our community. And so we're making different plans. Now this is a very new group starting out. We're going to have a remembrance walk along the Red River. We're going to have a ceremony led by our shaman, who is a Willard Yellowbird, who is a very close friend of mine and really helped us at the healthcare system in addressing the spiritual needs of our Indigenous people, and has given me my Arikara Native name as well. And we're going to have Concordia College, which is a Lutheran college. They have definitely offered to host educational programs so that some of our Indigenous leaders can help educate the people who are unaware of what was happening. Our Benedictine sisters have a university not too far from here, and they had staffed 4 of the boarding schools. And so they are taking a very active role. in educating their alumni, their students, their community about telling the truth of what happened within their boarding school history and the schools that they had at the White Earth Reservation and other reservations. So, but there is a story I wanted to just tell you about Rosebud. I had mentioned Rosebud, and this was one of the reservations where they took the children way out to Carlisle. So they were notified about 9 children who they found their remains, and they could identify who these children were, and they belonged to Rosebud. And so they took a few cars and trucks, 9 to be exact. They drove out the 1,300 miles. Some people have been running out there as well to remember these children. They went out and they put their remains of these little ones in a 3-foot wooden box. They brought them back to have a respectful burial at home on the reservation. And I couldn't be there that day, but it was beautiful to get a video, to see a video that one of my friends had sent me, and listening to the flute music. And as you see them come, you see this procession of vehicles, 9 of them, coming home with these children. And then they buried them in the sacred area with their ancestors, and they wrapped each little box either in a buffalo skin or a star blanket. It was beautiful. And then they had their ceremonies, their dancing, their drummers. They had just a beautiful ceremony. Now we have children who have also went from Pine Ridge Reservation, and so we'll see what's going to happen there. But it really, I think, helped many of the people during that time. It certainly helped me. And just to know that they're back home in their sacred burial ground. Finally, about this group that we have, and I'm telling you, this is really the beginning stages, but I have no idea where the Spirit is leading us. We started with 7, and we're continuing to grow, and more wonderful ideas and suggestions are coming up. And I do know one thing, and that is, I think the time is right. Everything is really right at this time to know the truth about our boarding schools. And when we do that, I think that all of us will have the grace to heal. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ellen. Your joy and your compassion is an inspiration to have the courage to face our truths.
Thank you.
To listen to the trauma.
I'm so happy.
Heal.
I'm just so happy to do this and do everything that I can.
Thank you. It's a gift for all of us. Thank you. And now I want to invite Simone, our media expert, to share her lived experiences addressing structures of racism in the United States and building solidarity. Simone?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, so I think that I'll start just saying that it's important in having these conversations to realize that we as white privileged people need to hold the burden of the oppression that has existed in this country since its founding. And it's important that we act as not only allies, but as people who can translate, these experiences rather than putting the burden on people of color to always explain their own oppression. And so, I think it's also important to think about ways in which we can create something like a rainbow coalition, where you're creating bridges between different communities and cultures, whether it be, queer people or Black people or, folks who are looking to bring voting rights to all and create a true democracy in the United States, finding ways to build bridges among us rather than the divisiveness that we've found to be so rampant these days. So I'm going to show a video. I started working with Black Voters Matter in 2018, and I clocked more hours on their bus than anyone else, more than the drivers, more than the founders. I traveled throughout the South which as a white female queer person going through Christian, all Black churches, I was always the only white person in the room pretty much, unless there was other media, and it was just a very interesting dynamic to explore. And it was an important experience because I was often very welcomed and actually felt incredibly connected to the people I met. And then there were also moments of discomfort, and feeling resentment as a white person coming in to film these communities. And that was an important experience for me. And it continues to kind of unfold, within me, the complexities of it. And I feel like as white people, we all need to take our own journey with this, and we all need to be uncomfortable sometimes. And no one really wants to be uncomfortable, but that's really at the heart of it when there has been oppression. And we need to have difficult conversations and be ambassadors and also be activists, actively changing this world for the better. I also just want to speak to the founders of Black Voters Matter, who are both incredible, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright, and they're based out of Atlanta. And just to say something about their work. So Black Voters Matter, their goal is to increase power in marginalized, predominantly Black communities. They do voter registration, get out the vote, police advocacy or policy advocacy, and organizational and development and training for on-the-ground activists, for grassroots organizations. They help fund grassroots organizations. They're on sort of the front lines of this work, and they help build organization and training where there has been none. And they advocate for policies to expand voting rights and access. And Cliff Albright often likes to quote Martin Luther King, and in this quote, which speaks to their mission, which is, "Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice." It's emotional to read this. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I'm trying to share my video here. Sorry, that got me very emotional.
Oh, we appreciate your truth and your trusting us with it.
Yes.
If I were in church, someone would say, "Can the church give an amen?" I hope our technician can enable your screen share. There we go.
Can you guys see that? Okay. All right, here we go. Let's see.
Good morning, how you doing?
Black Voters Matter bus rolling into Louisville in Jefferson County, Georgia. Great day, an incredible gathering with some of the seniors at the center.
We had an amazing nonpartisan rally this morning. We gotta have record numbers. We need y'all to get everybody in your family to the polls and send a message that we ain't going back, right? That you can't keep messing with our vote. And every time you mess with our vote, a little more mad we get. And every time we get mad, we got 5 more folks we coming with us. We were going out so that the seniors could see the bus. And many of them wanted to ride the bus.
They were fired up, high energy, excited to go spread the word to their folks, excited to go vote, out here, literally out here dancing and having a party in front of the senior center, getting on the bus to go vote at the polling place. Everybody excited to go vote.
Someone had passed by and saw the seniors getting on the bus and called the county commissioner's office to tell them that we can't do that. Now, there's no law that says that Black folk can't ride on buses no more.
So the bad news is they're gonna make us get off the bus right now, and that's okay. Because y'all still gonna make it do what it do.
So they're so mad and low down that we getting jealous. But they can't stop the rain. You can't stop it, whatever God got for us. And you can't stop us, can you? We're going down there to vote. That's right. We are going to vote.
And somebody called the commission, the county commission, to complain because they saw all these black folks get on this big black bus. It's the blackest bus in America. Somebody drove past, saw that, got nervous, got mad, called the county commission's office, which came across the center. And the bottom line was all the folks who had just got on the bus, and the bus was full. This is a 50-passenger bus full of folks, had to come off the bus. There's not a candidate on this bus. There's not a party symbol on this bus. But I'm gonna tell you what is on this bus. A whole bunch of black fists in the air with the word power underneath it. That's what scared them and made them say those folks have to come off that bus.
The irony around this is we were invited to come. We were invited by a woman who is a leader in this community who had already talked to the county commission to let them know that we were here, had already got a permission from the center that we were here. So none of that, what happened was a real issue. What it was an intimidation factor, right? But it ain't gonna stop us. Can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop.
Okay, so that's the first video. Can you guys view that okay? Did that come through all right?
It sure did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that was 2018. I'll just speak briefly to that. Basically what happened was they had this event and they had about 50 seniors and they were going to assist giving them rides to a polling place, which is totally legal. And there was a city commissioner, a very young white man, probably 40 years old, who was contacted by someone who drove by and saw the bus. And, you know, these small towns in Georgia, that was Louisville, it's basically, there's levels of oppression on all levels of government. So this was the municipal, local level. And all he did was give a call to the director, you know, and who's a black woman, and basically say, yeah, I'm not comfortable with you driving this bus to the polls. Now, this is a woman who gets funding from the city, you know, and he has the purse strings. So there's all these levels, you know, of power at play. And she came out and whispered to my, you know, client, the founder, Cliff Albright, and said, you know, we got to get these folks off the bus because she doesn't want to lose her job. So these are just some of the dynamics at play, you know, and this kind of thing happens every day a million times, you know, in rural Georgia and all over the country. So, you know, a lot of those folks still went to vote, you know, the next day. So they were determined, but this was just one example of voter suppression on many different levels. And I'm going to show another video. So that was 2018. They were doing a lot of organizing in Georgia, you know, when Stacey Abrams was running for governor. And, you know, of course, that election was essentially stolen because a lot of voters were purged from the polls, purged from the ballot. And that enraged so many activists. There was so much organization on the ground that happened in 2018 that it actually only fed the fire. And as a result, you know, Latasha and Cliff and Stacey Abrams and her organization Fair Fight and all the amazing activists on the ground kind of doubled down, and they went even harder. And as a result, we have a new president. And as a result, we have a Senate, you know, in Democratic leadership. And this is very much, you know, we have very much to thank Black Voters Matter and Fair Fight, you know, Stacey Abrams' campaign. We wouldn't be in the position we're in now. So, so I'm going to share just a couple more videos, and then it's always helpful to kind of get a story that you can, you know, then kind of speak to. So let me play my next video. 1 second. So that was 2018. I'm just going to show one more video. It was called the South is Rising Tour. So this, Latasha and Cliff have been doing this work for about 20 plus years, 25 years. They've had a lot of defeats. And recently they've been just getting a lot of traction and success. And so 2018, I think, was kind of like a turning point. So this is one more video from that year. And then I'll just move ahead to 2021 when we had all these wins. Can you see that? Yeah, okay.
We're on the first day of Black Voters Matter, the South is Rising voter outreach tour. Black Voters Matter is one of the few groups that actually focuses on the Black belt in rural America. So we are going out to the rural countryside to connect with communities and people that are doing amazing voter work.
Everybody keeps talking about Alabama, Doug Jones, and Black women with the 98%. Well, that's each of you. It just took the country time to know what you do every day.
We want to work in coalition with you all and with groups that are organized. Organize yourself. The bottom line is sometimes it is our belief that is stopping us, right? And not believing in our own power. The power is us. Ain't nobody giving us nothing. We don't need anybody to give us nothing. We got everything we need. We have a record number of women who are running to lead our community, and I just believe that it's the right time. I believe that people are hungry for change.
It's important to agree to take 5 things to go and vote because Black voters matter.
We care, and we came more than voting. We just want to remind you that we love you. You are not alone. We are standing in solidarity with you. Very excited to see the bus. I want to get on the bus.
I'm so excited about this tour. Finally, somebody is coming down south and seeing what we're about, right? And listening to the minds and souls and wishes of our folks to figure out where and how we move together and be.
Our voice matters and we count, and we're gonna make it known that the Black vote made the difference.
My main focus is young people. You know, I like to see the young people get involved.
Everybody vote, blowing they go vote. We have a team over at the college that's doing a knock and drag. They're going to dorms, they're sweeping the dorms, they're putting them on vans, and they're actually bringing them over here to vote.
North Florida, sometimes we say South Georgia, South Alabama, but North Florida got it going on, and we just want to support and help amplify the messaging.
We think that the way that you end voter suppression is that we've got to support the people on the front lines that are doing the work to stop it. But it really is about the future of this nation and the future of how we're going to go forward around making sure that every single person has access to the ballot. All right. Oh, I am excited. I'm ready. I am fired up. I am fired up.
Yeah, so that's 2018. Yeah, so I was riding with the bus and filming, doing the actual filming myself and the actual editing. I would wake up in the morning, get on the bus. I wouldn't know what was going to happen that day. I never really knew where we were going to go because it was always shifting. They were very spontaneous. They had a plan, but it was always evolving. And I never knew what the story of the day would be. So it was very exciting, and it was nothing like anything I have ever done before. And I would stay up until, say, 3, 4, sometimes 5 a.m. doing the edit from that day. So it was like a very quick turnaround of content. And that was very gratifying because I was sort of getting this content out on their social media within like 24 hours of it happening. So it was just very live, vibrant process. And so I was traveling on the bus through 2019. And then of course, in 2020, we hit the pandemic. And so I actually have a wonderful shooter who's actually Haitian, and he lives in Miami, and he travels with the bus, and then he ships me the footage, and I turn it over, pretty quickly, usually within a few days. And I've been working with them, Black Voters Matter, for about, I guess, going on 3 or 4 years now. So it's turned into something of a remote relationship, but I hope to get back on the road with them once it feels safe. let's see, I'll play one or two more. Susan, how many minutes do I have? Do I have maybe another 5 or 6 minutes, or where are we at?
Yeah, you have until 53 minutes. So that's 4 minutes.
Okay, great. I'll show one more video. Let's see. I'm going to show the most recent one, and this is their Freedom Ride that they put on a 10-state or 9-state Freedom Ride. And that was a Freedom Ride for voting rights, and it was the 60-year anniversary of the original Freedom Rides. So I'll just let the video speak for itself here.
West Virginia. We're demonstrating that this is movement. Part of the reason we wanted to come here so that we can let our friends, our brothers and sisters in West Virginia know that you are not alone. You are not alone.
My union has organized over 5,000 workers in the South. When we fight, we win. I'm ready for change in West Virginia. I'm ready for change in the U.S. I'm ready for change around the world. The majority of West Virginians want the For the People Act. So guess what? Somebody lied. So the future existence Christ deep here, y'all. And so we got to stand in that faith and in that power.
If you believe that we got the power to get this voting rights that we deserve, I need you to put a fist up and say, I am a freedom rider.
When they're at the mall in Washington, D.C. advocating for protection voting rights and the passage of the For the People Act.
The time is now for DC statehood, and the time is now to change this America.
We are fighting for Black liberation, period.
It's incredible, riding for freedom, to make these statements coming out and actually putting boots on the ground around these organizations, around these efforts. It's powerful.
It's time for DC statehood.
I am a freedom rider because we gotta let them understand that if they're trying to take something from us, that means that black vote is very important. So we gotta keep that vote in hand.
What would America be if we really had democracy? Can you imagine that? Then fight for it.
That's the business that we're in. We make things happen that nobody else makes it happen.
I'm a freedom rider because I believe in Black liberation, and until all of us are free, none of us are free. So we got a lot of work to do.
All right. Yeah, so that's my work with Black Voters Matter.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your excellent videos. I don't know if anyone else picked up on the parallels with what Ellen shared about communities that didn't have film way back when, but they had music, they had ceremony, they had ritual, they had dance. And, you know, thank goodness we have video now and that we can share virtually. And your work will continue virtually. So it's a great gift. I just want to remind all of our viewers on YouTube to feel free to write questions in the chat. And at the very end of our presentations, we'll take some questions for Q&A. So go ahead and do that. So thank you so much, Simone.
Thank you, Susan.
Next on our agenda is Sam Ho, working in education in California. And Sam, I know you were hoping to welcome some guests today. I turn it over to you, Sam.
I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Well,
That's all right.
Yes,
go right ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to share with you about the topic today. And my name is Sam Ho. I'm Director of Communications and Community Relations and Diversity at San Jose Evergreen Community College District. And it's an honor for us to be here with you this afternoon. This is California time as well as ADT time. We have with us here our some very distinguished leaders in our San Jose Evergreen Community College district community, especially at San Jose City College. We have with us is Dr. Jerry Grudzen. He is professor of philosophy at San Jose City College. Would you like to say hi, Professor Jerry Grudzen?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have Professor Sami Ibrahim, who is a professor of chemistry at San Jose City College. Sami?
Hello.
Thank you very much. And Astrid Uchikua, is he able to be here with us? Okay, so possibly the student from City College is not going to be here with us, but the topic as we have today is addressing structures of racism and building human solidarity in the United States. I won't be able to speak much for the United States, but I certainly can speak for the San Jose Evergreen Community College District, and also San Jose City College. When we talk about racism, what we've heard from Ellen and from Simone really brought home to the message of racism and the impact that it has on people's lives, and bring it home to us in every local area, including the district. I looked on Wikipedia and I found out the definition for structural racism. It also can be known as institutional racism or systemic racism. And it's defined as a form of racism that is embedded through the laws and regulations within society or an organization, and it can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education, among other issues. And it also was defined by Sir William Macpherson in the UK's Lawrence Report in 1999 as the collective failure of an organization to provide an appropriate and professional service to people because of their color, culture, or ethnic origin. And it can be seen or detected in processes, attitudes, and behavior that amount to discrimination through prejudice, ignorance, thoughtlessness, and racist stereotyping, which disadvantage minority ethnic people. So that I think we all here understand the impact, the negative impact it has in terms of racism against any particular group. And so within the next 20 minutes or so, each of us here, Dr. Grudzen, Professor Ibrahim, and myself, each of us will have about 5 to 7 minutes, and within that 20 minutes, we'll be able to share with you what we have at San Jose City College and Evergreen Valley College here. So quickly, I will have some slides, but I'll go through them really quickly because I think most of us can pick it up really well. But the key message is about addressing racism, also as building human solidarity. So certainly important to know that our district's boards adopted ENDS policies stating that the district exists to ensure all students, especially those with educational and/or social economic challenges, will have the skills and capabilities to be successful in the next stage of their life. And the mission of the district is to meet the diverse educational and workforce needs of our community by empowering our students to become agents of social economic change. And this, as I read this mission, it reflects on me, the speakers of today, as well as the panel and people like Susan and Ellen and Simone and many of us today here really live as agents of social economic change. And I want to thank you for that leadership. We are in a circle of people who really share the same mission. And the vision of the district is to be an educational institution in the region to advance opportunity, equity, and social justice through educational excellence. So as I reflect on this, it's not about a big car, it's not about a big house, it's not about how much we have in the bank, but it's really about when we leave this earth or when we live on this earth, what do we leave as a legacy? Is it to advance opportunity, equity, and social justice for all? And that can be accomplished through educational excellence. And the education is a powerful tool that we must never forget to prioritize that everything we do is to educate our next generation in terms of becoming an agent of change for opportunity, equity, and social justice. And those are the three values that are, that are the characteristics that describe our district. Is everything that we do, our strategic planning, our foundational commitments are all based on opportunity, equity, and social justice for all. And as we speak about the definition of structural racism there, we know that it has to do with organizations' policies, the laws and policies and regulations. So we make sure that our district, over 1,000 of the members of our district who work at the district, and over 20-some thousand students every year that go to our college district, understand well of the federal law, state law, and the district policies that are to protect the rights of the people through the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title 6 and 7, which is to prohibit discrimination against anyone based on their race, color, sex, origin, and so forth. And then prohibiting discrimination against people with disabilities through the American with Disabilities Act of 1990, the Age Discrimination Act of 1975 for those who are 40 and above, and Title 9 of Education Amendments Act of 1972, prohibiting discrimination against someone based on their gender. And then state laws, including the California Government Code, Section 11-135 through Section 11-139.5, and the California Fair Employment Housing Act, which is also known as FEHA. And the district's policies, the board adopt policies such as equal employment opportunity, diversity policy, non-discrimination policy, recruitment and hiring policy, EEO, and diversity plan, equity plans. So to address structural racism that has to do with regulations and laws and policies, we use these as our guiding light to make sure that we live and act, and through all the programs and services, we do not violate any of these laws and policies, and that's in a way structurally challenging racism through these means. And so quickly, I will go through a few seconds of each of these slides, but we do measure of what we treasure, and we want to monitor how things are moving along. And part of that is people. We have policies and laws, but we have people who either make or enforce those policies or laws. So how do we measure that? We measure progress of implementation of these policies and laws through the people that are the most important asset within our district. And those are our faculty, our staff, our administrators, and also our students. So we look at the district-wide student population, because for California community colleges, which is about 942 colleges in the United States and about 116 community colleges in California, we look at our own data for San Jose Evergreen Community College District from the fall of 2015 all the way through fall of 2020, which is about 15 years span of time. And we look at the last 3 years, fall 2018, 19, and 20, and make reports to our boards as a matter of accountability and how we make progresses. And we measure in terms of different ethnic groups, such as U.S. Census groups, like Asian, Black, Hispanic, White, Native American, Pacific Islander, and unknown. And of course, some of the other groups, subgroups are included in part of these bigger groups, or they can, we cannot address all of them, but these are consistent with the kind of categories that are in the U.S. Census data. So for that, we will see that the student population will reflect most likely the community, and it's important to see whether our people who provide the service as faculty, administrators, and classified professionals, do they align well with the student population to provide the necessary cultural and language barriers needs, or as well as other role model needs? And so when you have a chance, I'll post these slides for your access. We'll share with that Susan, and then we'll have it posted somewhere that people can go through these statistics, and any questions, just check with us. But I just want to go through that with you to let you know that we measure by the numbers and district-wide faculty numbers. How do they align with our student population, meaning aligning with the community that we serve in order to address them more effectively? And then classified staff, which is classified professionals, and administrators, we measure those data. Also, how student versus faculty numbers. And to share with you is that, as you know, USA has a total of 942 colleges, community colleges. And of that, as of 2020, the Chronicle of Higher Education ranked Evergreen Valley College as 4th out of 942 colleges to have the most diverse faculty population, and San Jose City College, which is our sister college, two colleges within our district. San Jose City College received 5th highest college that has the most diverse faculty population. So that is quite an accomplishment, and we're very proud of that, at least for within the past 20 years that I've been with the district, that as a leader in this area, working with many wonderful board members, key presidents, and also the chancellor. They are the ones who made the hiring and the policies and implement these policies. So we also have the information for employee demographic in terms of ethnicities and gender. And then certainly some of the practices that we would share is what do we do with pre-hiring, hiring, and retention. Those are important areas to focus on. And not only that, but we celebrate diverse histories and heritages of our community, college community. And we would designate this. One of the initiatives I took was take it to the board in 2001 when I first joined the district, and asked them to adopt these months to celebrate. And they've adopted September to October as Latinx Heritage Month, October, Filipino American History Month, Disability Awareness Month, and LGBTQA History Month, and National Coming Out Day. And in November is Native American Heritage Month, Sikh American Awareness and Appreciation Month. February, we celebrate Black African American History Month, and March, Women's History Month, Her Story Month. And then in April, Middle Eastern American Heritage Month, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. In May, June, LGBTQA Pride Month, and Caribbean American Heritage Month, and then multiple other special days such as Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, St. Andrew's Day, Tet, Nowruz, St. Patrick's Day, Cesar Chavez Day, Native American Cambodian New Year, Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, USA Independence Day, and so forth. And that has really played a key role in terms of a positive culture transformation at our college district and among our population. That's really key. And I want to introduce you quickly to our Professor Sami Ibrahim to talk a little bit about, as a director who really has voluntarily given up many hours and time and energy to lead in the Middle Eastern Heritage, American Heritage Month for over 20 years there. And we thank you for that, Professor Sami Ibrahim, for your kind heart and your generosity and your sacrifice in helping making us a better community. So Professor Sami Ibrahim.
Thank you very much. Before I begin, I would like to thank Simone. Never seen so many beautiful African Americans in my life. It is nice to see that. Also, in the list of ethnicities, I belong to the unknown category. I was born in Africa, born in Egypt. I'm African American, and also I'm proud to be the product of Africa and America. I lived here now for the last 60 years. Yes, following the disaster of 9/11, a faculty and staff and students met in the office of Sam Ho, and we decided to begin the annual Middle Eastern Heritage Celebration. And the objective was, or still is to inform the community about the history, rich culture, and the aspirations of all the peoples of the Middle East. In doing so, we hope to foster great understanding and mutual respect between the American people and the peoples of the Middle East, which will ultimately lead to peace. Some of the interesting development, we have received grants to teach Arabic language. This grant was written by Professor Grudzen. Also, in 2010, organized a trip to Egypt, educational journey. We had the largest ever American group in Egypt. 48 faculty and students participated. We saw many historic sites, but the most important was to visit educational institutions. Both Dr. Grudzen and myself led the group to Egypt for about 11 days or so. Okay, next slide. Sam? Yes. I would like to continue some more. During this time, we have invited the last 20 years now, we have been offering the annual Middle Eastern celebration. Our guests included authors, poets, musicians, folk dancers. We have also diplomats, and wanted to show the true Middle East, culture-wise. Okay. While Egypt, we visited Al-Azhar University, the School of Fine Arts in Luxor, Alexandria University, as well as the Library of Alexandria. And the most important part was our faculty and the students participated in discussions with the Egyptian counterparts. I believe that the American group that came back from Egypt were very, very happy, and were very surprised about the generosity and how they were received in Egypt. And the most common question or comment was, "You Americans are so nice. What is wrong with your government?" And it was kind of interesting to hear that. The foreign policy sometimes has to really change a lot. Let's see. In Egypt, by the way, we visit Old Cairo. And I showed them Old Cairo. We had the Church of Mary, the Synagogue of Ben Ezra, and the Mosque of Omar in the same neighborhood for hundreds of years. And recently in Egypt, they built the largest church next to the largest mosque in Cairo. It's good to see that. Do I have more time, Sam? Do I have more time? Am I done?
Yeah, I think we can transition to Dr. Grudzen, yes, and we can have more time afterward.
Is it my time now, Sam?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that came out of our trip to Egypt was I was looking into programs that our students could participate in that would connect them with students in the Middle East. So I found this program. I went to New York to the UN and I looked around and I found a program called Salia Connect, which was started maybe around 2006 or 7, but it has grown to over 200 colleges and universities. And it allows students, particularly community college students, to connect with students in the Middle East, Europe, and other parts of the United States. So many students cannot afford, particularly community college students, cannot afford to take a trip abroad. They're low income. So this allows students in the classes that I've been teaching for a number of years those who want to participate can take part of the credit for their course by being part of a dialogue program with students in other parts of the world. And I'll just share one interesting incident. I had a former military person who had been a soldier in Iraq, and he had fought against people in Iraq. He came to City College and he took my course. And in the process of taking Salih Connect, he met a group of people in Iraq who were part of the Salih Connect program. And they formed a close bond. And together they created a seminar for my students, combining people in Iraq and students in the US, showing how these two different parts of the world could get along and embrace each other. And this was a tremendous example of someone who had fought against people in Iraq, now partnering with them in an educational endeavor. So I think this is part of the beauty of education, is that you're able to transcend these kind of boundaries. And in the course that I was teaching on critical thinking, it allows them to collaborate not just with their own peers, but with people across the world in a way that is transformative. And that's part of the goal of Fratelli Tutti, is to be transformative. And I think education is one of the great ways for our youth to be transformed by interacting with those who are different than them. And I think since this program is sponsored by the Maryknoll Office of Global Concerns, it's an example of what the Global Concerns program is all about. So I think I'll stop there and then I'll turn it back to Sammy. Maybe he can say some more about some of the things he would like to talk about.
May I say that I have just retired after teaching chemistry for 50 years. And chemistry has no boundaries. I always refer to great scientists from many places, from Europe, America, and the East. So this is important. I was very happy to be a teacher. As a teacher, somewhat, I'm also a preacher as a teacher. So it is opportunity and my students actually were from many walks of life, from many nations, many cultures. And I believe that I was able to instill in them the love of chemistry. And chemistry, I think, will solve many future problems like global warming, as well as ocean acidity. And many things will probably come through chemistry. So this is what I've been doing for the last 50 years.
Thank you very much, Professor Sami Ibrahim, as well as Professor Jerry Grudzen. I've worked with both for all that time that we began the Middle Eastern Heritage Month celebration since 2001, 2002. And the dedication of these professors are such a shining example for what leadership is about, and caring about the students, understanding the student population they serve, having knowledge, understanding, and sensitivity to the diverse student population that we serve. And so I think everything begins and ends with the leaders in our community, and that's among many of us. And so I continue to thank you and to ask you to continue to be able to be a shining example ongoing for our student populations, which you probably serve over probably thousands of students over your years of education in this leadership role. So thank you very much. And with that, I think Astrid is not able to join us today, so that help us in terms of time a little bit. But some of the key takeaways that I'd like to just share with you is, to really effect change and to really address something such as structural racism, and to build a better community, human solidarity community. We want to make sure that we begin at the leadership and commitment level. I think that would apply to all of us here. And then we need to have laws, policies, and procedures that will advance the values of opportunity, equity, and social justice, as well as equality and non-discrimination for all. And then we take initiatives, taking actions and programs and plans and services in order to really advance those values and certainly create a culture of DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's a saying there that we've all heard that, tell me and I'll forget, but include me and I will help make it better. And also, finally, it's important to measure our success, our progress. And those are some of the key takeaways that we'd like to share with you. And I think at this time, Susan will return this back to you and for Q&A or other matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sam and for bringing your guests. It was so compelling to hear what they, as leaders in their position, can affect change and your measurements. I don't want to just slide past those. I want to recognize that when you have the student population and also the faculty population mirror the community population, that is dismantling racist policies that, old power structures that kept people out. That's right there, a clear measurement of change and empowerment and inclusion. I appreciate it quite a bit. Yeah. I just ask if you could stop sharing your screen, and I want to give an opportunity, thank you so much, to our next speaker, my neighbor in Washington, D.C., Nate Tinner-Williams, comes up to us today as a new seminarian with the Josephites. He's in formation for the Catholic priesthood, and he'll speak about addressing structures of racism in the Catholic Church in the United States and building solidarity among us. Welcome, Nate.
Thank you very much. I'll also be sharing my screen here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Great. And you can see this okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll start by saying that as an African American descended from slaves in the United States, it would probably be an understatement to say that my experience of daily life is culturally and otherwise shaped by structures of racism. As most all of you know, another way to refer to these structures is systemic racism. And while I don't personally have, a long list of stories about how I've been personally, victimized in incidents of racism, headline type stories, I would say that the kind of anti-Black prejudice that permeates the very fibers of this country's governance and social sphere, shows that the issue is really systemic. And even though I don't have these kinds of stories, perhaps that is even more illustrative of the fact that the issue is truly systemic, that it's not always in these one-off incidents that we remember and that stick with us. Being called a name when you walk down the street is not a systemic issue. Getting followed around in a convenience store is not a systemic issue. Being treated as an outsider in a setting where there's very little representation of people that look like you is not a systemic issue. The systemic issue is that we live in a society wherein these things can occur and have occurred for centuries with very few consequences, and even at times with outright incentive and encouragement within the government, economy, and even houses of worship. And as was noted, I will be focusing on that last point here because it is very specific to my experience. I'm a recent convert to Catholicism. In my former days, I was a Protestant in various denominations and traditions, including several that were established in the US on foundations of slavery, segregation, colonialism, and even genocide against, perhaps most of all, the Black descendants of slaves, my own people. For many years, and largely until I extricated myself from those traditions, I wasn't really able to see those things for what they were. I was much more interested in a simpler, more pleasant assessment that would kind of absolve me, I think, of perceived complicity in my own cultural suppression. At some point, I really began to convince myself that my culture was defective and that was not to be reflected in the expression of my Christianity, despite the fact that that was the tradition I was raised in. As I journeyed toward the Catholic Church and toward the sacraments, I was made aware, or I made myself aware going in, that I was joining a tradition that, even though it wasn't founded on that kind of anti-Black foundation, has had its own struggle with anti-Blackness, especially in the United States in its more recent history. But at the same time, as I was coming closer to the faith, the Catholic faith, I was learning that Black Catholics were very much a part of the history of the church and are, and they were very resilient. They were some of the first Black communities here in the United States, starting in St. Augustine, Florida, in Fort Caroline, South Carolina, Los Angeles, California, where I lived for many years, New Orleans, Louisiana, where I most recently lived, and in the Washington, D.C. area, where I now reside. These are hubs of American life and American history, and they were also hubs of Black Catholics, and they remain so. This hidden historical group that is often seen as insignificant by Americans of all ethnicities. It's not just a white issue that they are seen as almost invisible. And I would say that this story of Black Catholics, which is now my own story, is one of racism, yes, but also one of unshakable faith and community and Christian love and fraternity. As I learned more about this story, I also learned that although I was raised as a Protestant, my own maternal ancestors were Catholics. This was not something that I knew until I was converting. My ancestors then, therefore, faced the horrors of anti-Blackness in an era of almost unimaginable violence and oppression as Catholics in a church that claimed to be God's own dwelling place. And even so, their story was almost erased in my family when my mother was adopted by the only maternal grandparents that I ever knew. This sort of historical precarity is commonplace in the Black community of the United States, as most of the structures built to preserve history, families, and culture were never meant to accommodate us and our needs. To this day, I have been unable to uncover the full story of my ancestors, in part because of the failure of the church to make such records accessible for those who lacked the resources to preserve their family stories independently, and their religious stories, I should add. The story of my family and of Black Catholicism generally energized me to make the most important decision of my life. This was a major factor in my decision to convert. It wasn't just theological or religious, so to speak. It was also historical and personal. I became Catholic in late 2019, I would say despite the odds, joining my hidden ancestors in the most visible church in the world. Soon after,
Nate, I think I lost your audio. Nate, we can still see your screen, but I can't.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
The Josephites, despite their noble goal, have been infected with racism from their onset. Despite serving the Black community, they refused to allow the Black community to serve themselves, blocking most candidates from their seminary due to racist ideas about Black intelligence, culture, sexuality, and faith. Their ideas were not unique either. For most of American history, African Americans were banned from U.S. Catholic seminaries. To this day, the numbers remain low, and the promotion of vocations in the Black community is lackluster on virtually all levels. It's not something you hear about a lot in the church generally. I am one of only a handful of African American seminarians nationwide, despite the community of African American Catholics being roughly 3 million strong in 2021. In addition to this fact, the legacy of Black Catholics in the US, not just in my own family, is one of forgotten histories. And by that, of course, I mean deliberate erasure and neglect, alongside exasperation within the Black community and the lack of resources to deal with historical trauma. Even so, the legacy of Black Catholic activists against these issues is undeniable, from Mary Ellen Pleasant, who helped fund John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, to Homer Plessy, who kickstarted the civil rights movement before it was even thought of as a movement, to Dr. Thomas Wyatt Turner, who helped desegregate U.S. Catholic institutions, to A.P. Touro, who helped desegregate U.S. public schools, to Servant of God Thea Bowman, who helped bring Black culture into the Catholic Church and the Catholic liturgy, to Amanda Gorman, who wowed the world earlier this year with her defiantly hopeful poem, The Hill We Climb.
We lost your audio. We hope you can make it back.
They weren't things that were being pointed out to me when I talked to my friends about Catholicism. These were things I had to go find in a book that most people don't read, History of Black Catholics in the United States by Father Cyprian Davis. And I had a certain determination to kind of fight these stereotypes and emphasize that Black Catholics have helped shape this country and also the church into the good things that they are today. Even so, these Black Catholic stories are notable in part because they were preceded by such rampant and even terroristic opposition to Black lives and Black flourishing. My desire to tell and to synthesize these stories inspired me last year to follow in the steps of another Black Catholic pioneer, Daniel Rudd. He was one of the first Black newspaper publishers in the country. He began his work in the late 19th century, and he was the first to organize Black Catholics nationally for gatherings related to social activism and religious formation. His work was groundbreaking, and I mean that very sincerely. Like most Catholics, I don't think know his name, but what he did, the effects of it, the ripple effects are unbelievable now. However, his work was short-lived. His organization faced opposition from paternalistic white clergy, which largely derailed the purpose of the organization. When they would gather, they would invite white priests and bishops to give keynotes, and often their messages were about respectability politics or just generally not about Black uplift, but more so about safe Blackness, which is an issue that still exists very much so today, even within the Black community. When economic pressures caused the collapse of Daniel Rudd's Black Catholic newspaper, the church hierarchy apparently felt his work was not worthy of further support. It was never revived, and while other Black Catholic newspapers popped up in the following years, none lasted long, and the Black Catholic daily news tradition soon faded from memory. Personally, I saw this as a scandal when I was thinking about this last year. And this was after the incidents, after the murder of George Floyd and the protests that followed. And I was thinking to myself, I know Black Catholics are involved in all this, despite what people will say about the Catholic Church and its involvement with these sort of activism movements. But who is telling our stories? Who is covering us? Who is speaking out and saying, you know, here's where the Black Catholics or Catholics generally are advocating for social justice and for Black lives? And I didn't really have a good answer. There was no news publication dedicated to us, despite the fact that there are 3 million of us, and despite the fact that 125 years ago, there was a newspaper dedicated to exactly that. So yes, I saw it as a scandal, both in its bluntness and also in its persistence. There hasn't been a Black Catholic newspaper, had not been a Black Catholic newspaper in roughly a century. And so a group of Black Catholics and I formed Black Catholic Messenger last October. It's an online publication dedicated to our stories, our history, and our voices. And I mentioned earlier that Amanda Gorman is from a Josephite parish, and Black Catholic Messenger was also the first to report on the fact that she is Catholic. And it became a huge news story thereafter. And no, I don't know that anyone even knew that it was the Messenger that broke that story, but that was where it kind of clicked for me, the importance of telling these stories. That was within a few months of when we started that we covered a story of beyond national significance. That was a Black Catholic story. Thankfully, due to Daniel Rudd, I can't say that Black Catholic Messenger is the first endeavor of its kind, but I can say it's unique in the digital age and in modern Catholic media. Over the past 10 months, our readership has grown in leaps and bounds and continues to grow as we continue to tell untold stories, past and present. It's an exciting work, and I pray that it will continue unabated, though I know that's not necessarily a guarantee. Racism is still alive and well in our country, and it's certainly still alive and well in the Catholic Church. In 1968, the National Black Catholic Clergy Caucus said as much in their founding manifesto. They said that the Catholic Church in the United States is primarily a white racist institution, and it orients itself towards that community. And many of their other concerns in that manifesto about education, representation, paternalism, and violence tragically still ring true as well. So what will be our response? To whom do we turn for respite in an age of so-called decaying faith, apathy concerning the faith among young people, and the reticence of many in the church, clergy and lay, to embrace the radical call of the gospel and boots on the ground activism, as opposed to partisan politics? I can say today, as a proud Black man, as a proud Catholic, as a proud seminarian, and as a proud journalist, I think there's really only one good answer. We must speak without fear. I know that I didn't use my whole 20 minutes, but that is that.
We must speak without fear, as you have just done for us, Nate. Thank you so much. If you could go ahead and stop sharing your screen.
We can be convinced that the way things are is okay, and that because of how far we've come, so to speak, that we don't need to keep our feet on the pedal. But I think that is a lie from hell, and there's still so much work to do. But I thank you for listening to me today, and God bless you all. Black Lives Matter, Black Power.
Thank you. Thank you, Nate and Sam and Simone and Ellen. This is fantastic. We have covered so much of the United States society, from community to education, to media, to our religious institutions. And I really want to recognize your willingness to share yourselves with us. So speaking so honestly and challenging us. We have a couple of questions for our remaining minutes, and I want to make sure I have one question for each of you. So forgive me if those of you who put questions in the chat, if I don't hit all of the questions. I just want to make sure we hit all of the topics. And, I'm not going to go in the order of speakers. I'm just going to go in the order of where they are, where they've fallen on my notes. My first question, Simone, one of the things that you said is we really need to be a rainbow coalition, building bridges across divides, divided groups, and also reaching isolated groups and connecting isolating groups. For Black Voters Matter, what needs to happen next? I mean, we've all been paying attention, really the wake-up call of the murder of George Floyd and the aftermath with the election, what happened in Georgia. But what's next? It's quite fearful hearing the news coming out of certain states about limitations on voting. And what do you think the next step should be, either in Congress or is it state level?
Yeah, I think we need action at every level. And I think that there's like a three-pronged kind of movement, which is, we need to fund these grassroots organizations on the ground that educate folks on how to vote where they live, and that help folks get for example, formerly incarcerated folks, restore their right to vote, whether it's in Florida or Alabama or wherever. And then you have, the national level, the Senate. And I think a lot of it just has to do with educating folks and also funding the right grassroots organizations and funding Black Voters Matter, who have gotten a lot of support behind them. But I think, we as individuals can do a lot, whether it be giving money, but also educating those around us on how to support these organizations and how to support, these communities that are in such pain, whether it's due to police violence or, voter suppression. There's so many issues that we can support these Black communities on. So I think standing in solidarity with those who are suffering, whether it be through poverty, through police violence, through the suppression of the vote. And then I also think storytelling, just continue to tell real stories and share them, whether it be through text or video or just spoken word, just really try to forge bridges with other communities and cultures. And I think if we continue to do that, there's really no stopping us, because I think we have so much momentum right now that the far right is quite scared. And I think they see the tide is turning. So I think this is, I agree, this is the time to really put, the pedal to the metal and complete this transition to a more true democracy where folks can really speak for themselves and have equal representation. So that's my thought.
Wow, I appreciate your optimism and energy to keep us going in these really serious times. Thank you.
Sure.
My next question is for you, Ellen. Bob Short, who you may know from the Maryknoll affiliates, has offered a question, and I'm going to read it to you. And I think you're the person to answer this because it really speaks about an international focus. As white nationalism appears to be on the rise among some sectors in the United States, have some of the vestiges of colonialism in other countries diminished in recent times? And would you agree with that? And is there anything that can influence or help the United States? So recognizing colonialism, do you see its diminishment maybe in Peru or with the native communities that you're in relationship with?
I'm not an expert in that. I have not seen the diminishment. When I went to Peru 2 years ago, I haven't seen it among our indigenous community. I also spent time working in South Africa. I didn't see it there either 4 years ago. But I'm saying there would be someone probably that could better address that issue. And I also belong to an international group with indigenous people. And I haven't seen that addressed.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should need to continue to tell our stories and truth around the world in every community and recognize what we have in common, whether it's Peru or South Africa or Native communities, the First Nations in the Americas. And it reminds me of Father Brian Massengale and what he had to say when he received the Teacher of Peace Award from Pax Christi USA recently, when he named white nationalism as the greatest threat to peace today. And I think that if we were to look at Haiti or what's happening there,
Yes.
and Afghanistan today, the Native communities of the Americas, and our own African-American communities. It's white nationalism and the structures of racism that perpetuate poverty and limit the dignity of life to flourish. Thank you. Well, my next question is for Sam, working in education. And you so brilliantly demonstrated that with a focus on shared values and the right laws and leaders, that you can affect positive change. My question is about student debt and the impact of student loans on young people today, and how that might be a new, or if not so new, way of a structure of discrimination that is limiting students as they come out of college. And I don't know if you or your college has a way to assist students to escape that.
Yes, that's a great question, Susan, and thank you for that question. I believe that America should not be a country where students graduate with debts to begin with and build their life. We have to change that America. That's not the America that was meant to be. We need to change that immediately. At the community college level, we fight for free college tuition. And right now, I think we have at least first year and probably, I think it's 2 years, free college at this time for the tuition. So that's where it should be, college. For a civilized United States, a leader in the world here, education should not be a burden for our students at 18, 19, 20 years old, looking at the potential debt of over $100,000, which my son just graduated from UC Davis, and that's about how much we owe, over $100,000 for his 4-year colleges. And now if he's going to go to graduate school and then a postgraduate school, he's looking at a debt that's going to change his decision making to contribute into the medical field in the United States for other people. And that can change somebody's future, that can impact people who can benefit from his services. We have to change that. And there should be that trillions of dollars of debt for our young people. I think that is the greatest burden that we all have to address, and address it quickly. We cannot be the America that has that kind of a situation. That sounds more like a third world country. Where I came from, they have to buy their education, buy their way through. We cannot have it that way. Education should be free for all Americans, and they should never graduate with debts, probably more than $10,000 in my estimate. We can do it, and we must do it.
Well, I'm with you on that. I have 3 children and 2 in college. And it's terrifying, and it affects our choices, the choices we make, and the trajectory of your life. You either take the plunge and take on that debt and hope it all works out, or no, you don't even go there, and you make other life choices. It's very difficult. I agree. It's an injustice that needs to be reformed, and it's up to us to make it happen. Thank you. My next question is for you, Nate. You mentioned, maybe a little too quickly, the name of your publication. So, Black Catholic Messenger, where to find it, how can people read it? And then finally, you asked the question, who is telling our stories? Definitely we'll read Black Catholic Messenger, but who else should we be reading? Who would you recommend?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Do you mean authors or people or other journalists?
Oh, well, I'm open to anything, but maybe we'll start with authors.
Well, I know that Dr. Shannon D. Williams out of Villanova is going to release a book on Black nuns soon. Her work is very powerful. I'm sure you probably all know that Father Brian Massengale has written a book on racism in the church, and he's a professor at Fordham. There's also a very important book about priesthood, specifically about Black men in the priesthood in America, called Desegregating the Altar by Dr. Stephen J. Oakes. He's actually located here in the DC area. And he also has another book on a Black Catholic Civil War hero, Captain Andre Caillou. I think those are all important pieces or important books to read. As far as journalists, I guess because of the reasons that caused us to create BCM, I don't know that there's a lot of Black Catholic journalists in the Catholic media sphere that you can read. Dr. Williams, who I mentioned, she does have a monthly column with Catholic News Service. Father Brian Massengale, he writes editorials from time to time for different publications. But I mean, it is kind of a dire situation with the lack of Black Catholics in Catholic media. There are a few, but they're not prolific. And so I can't recommend a ton of journalists in that sphere. But I'm proud to note that a lot of Black Catholics are doing big things in the secular media sphere. Yamiche Alcindor is Black Catholic. She's probably the most prominent. I believe she works with PBS NewsHour.
Yes.
Yes.
At 6 p.m. daily.
There you go. As a very prominent Black Catholic who's doing important things in the journalism world, keeping us informed about things. So yeah, that's another name to have on your radar.
Now I'm going to say it again. Tell us where to find your publication.
You can find us at blackcatholicmessenger.com, also at blackcatholic.news. You can find us on social media. Facebook is, our username is Black Catholic Messenger, Instagram, Black Catholic Messenger. Twitter is annoying. The username has to be much shorter. It's BLKCATH stories on Twitter. So yeah, you can find us pretty much everywhere people hang out online. We also have a YouTube channel. I don't know if it's with a username though, so you might just want to search Black Catholic Messenger. We'll pop up on there. We have a sporadic, I'll say, podcast that we post on there and also on other podcast platforms.
Well, your productivity is to die for. My gosh, with your full-time studies and hosting a news publication, it's like 2 full-time jobs. But we're all grateful, and we expect to see this for a long time to come.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I wanted to recognize Professor Ibrahim and Professor Gutzner on this trip to Egypt that you named. You know, as a Maryknoll employee, I absolutely support immersion and relocation and going out of your comfort zone to meet the other. You never forget it. And that was my take from hearing you speak of this trip that was a few years ago. But the power of it is life transforming. And Father Ibrahim, I wonder if you could say, you know, fingers crossed, coming out of the pandemic, maybe next year, if you were to put together a trip for your students, where would you hope that they could go, thinking about everything that we've been going through in recent years?
We would go to the same places we have been to before. There is no question. We have visited many, many monuments in Cairo, Alexandria, Luxor, Aswan, as well as visiting universities and schools of art. That's very important because most tourists will not talk to Egyptians unless you're a teacher and a student, then you can communicate with the students. I remember at Al-Azhar University, one of the professors spoke about how Egypt was shaped by Moses, by Christ, and by Muhammad in the same time. I would like to add a few more things. I am Muslim, and as a biblical religion, it follows Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The foundation of Islam is based on 2 things: the belief in one God and one humanity. No kidding, one humanity. We all came from Adam, and he came from dust of the earth. When Islam came to Egypt, or came to Indonesia, or came to Africa, they celebrated the culture. They adopted the culture of the people. Nobody was forced to change his clothes or his language. So because of that, they flocked to Islam. When the Muslims came to Egypt, Muhammad told them the Egyptians are very cultured people. Treat them with respect. In fact, the patriarch of Egypt sent one Egyptian woman to marry Muhammad. So it became a family. The Muslims came to Egypt to fight the Romans, not the Christians. The Holy Land likewise. They came to the Holy Land to fight the Romans, not the Christians. And the same in Indonesia. There was no war in Indonesia. They all became the largest Muslim nation in Asia, is Indonesia. I really cringe when I feel I can say to myself, how can a civilized man be racist? never appears. How can this be? How can we be civilized and being racist? Because being racist is uncivilized to me. How much time do we have, by the way? I must seem like, do you have time?
About 2 more minutes.
Okay. I live in the town of Los Altos. I came to America in '61. I studied soil science and chemistry. Los Altos is a very small town, and mostly whites and Asians. But lately, there have been some discussion about race issues in the city council as well as in the press. And in my street here in Los Altos, it's amazing to see a big sign in the front yard that says Black Lives Matter. It's unheard of where I lived before, where I lived for the last 50 years. That's a very hopeful sign. Also, I belong to the Los Altos Voices for Peace. And a while back, we invited a professor who spoke on beyond tolerance, how Muslims, Jews, and Christians built a civilization in Spain during our presence. Muslim scholars, Christian scholars, Jewish scholars, they actually introduced Europeans to the Greek culture and the Greek philosophers. So what I call the Renaissance began in Spain when the Muslims were in Spain. They believed that there is no conflict between faith and reason. Among the students of the famous scholar Ibn Rushd, among the students were the great Jewish scholar, his name, Ibn Maimun or Maimonides, as well as St. Thomas Aquinas. They were the students of the Muslim scholar of Spain. So what happened before? We were harmful for the three religions to coexist. And I hope this will happen again. When I hear the expression, make America great again, I think that's ridiculous. America has always been great for two reasons: education and freedom. I can give you the names of 5 people, highly educated and very, very articulate, who saved America from disasters. One of them is Dr. Lawrence Pauling, who discovered that nuclear testing is contaminating the soil of America. The cow milk was radioactive, and he fought and fought till finally America agreed to sign the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty that forbade firing nuclear weapons in the air. The next one is Rachel Carson. You heard about Rachel Carson, who pointed out about DDT is killing birds, and she succeeded. We also have Dr. Patterson, who discovered that the gas additive which contains lead is causing brain damage to humans. He fought the Ethyl Corporation and he won. Now it is illegal to add any lead to gasoline. Then we have Ralph Nader, the consumer advocate, who challenged General Motors about building safe cars. And lately in Flint, Michigan, a lady who is a doctor came from Palestine, or I believe Jordan, and she discovered that the water in Flint was contaminated with lead. The kids had lots of issues thinking, and she again fought and she won. So I'm very grateful to these American educated people. So I say education as well as freedom to speak is make this country great. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Well, you answered my last question. What gives you hope? That's something I wanted to ask each person here on the panel, and you just gave a beautiful answer by sharing the names of these fantastic scientists who have changed the world for the better for all of us. So I want to pass the mic and just call each of you, if you could just very briefly just a sentence or two. Share with us what gives you hope to send us on our way today. Professor Grudzen, could I call on you? Could you tell
Sure.
us something?
I think what gives me hope is the success of this conference. We've been working for a year on it, bringing people from various parts of the world to work on this in a collaborative way. And when we started, it was like a dream. Can this really occur? I think this is the first time this type of international interfaith conference has been accomplished, particularly in the light of one document, Fratelli Tutti. So the fact that we gradually pulled together people from diverse parts of the world and came together to do this, and I believe we're succeeding very well, is a good thing that gives me great hope.
Wonderful, thank you. And Simone, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the power of storytelling and its impact, and the power of community, and the power of human connection, I would say.
Brilliant. And that's what we're trying to do today. Thank you. Yeah. And Ellen, what gives you hope these days?
Well, I am filled with hope when I think about the people of many races and spiritualities throughout the world who are working to free people from racism and to have equity and human rights for all.
Wonderful, thank you. And Nate, tell us, what gives you hope these days?
The fact that people are still dedicated to social action, especially within the Catholic Church, that number, even though they are opposed, will never quite go away. I think it's important and powerful.
Yeah, no, we'll never go away. That's for sure. I promise you that. And Sam, I'm going to offer you the last word. What gives you hope?
Thank you, Susan, and appreciate hearing from Ellen as well as Simone and Nate and Professor Ibrahim as well as Professor Grudzen. And thank you all for listening today and being with us here on this very important topic of addressing structural racism and also at the building the human solidarity. And that's what we are about. What gives me hope is really along the line of Margaret Mead, who says that, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I really am encouraged to see a small group of people like we are today on the panel, as well as in the team that put together for this, because you represent the circles of your networks that share the same values, the same mission, the same cause, the same commitment. And I think that, continue working together, as Simone just shared with us, is about connection, humanity with other people and working together. And I think human create this structural racism. Human can break it down, and we need to continue to break it down and to make it so that all can enjoy the benefits of opportunity, equity, and social justice every day of our life and for our future generations.
Oh, thank you. I'm afraid we've run out of time. We've hit the top of the hour, and I'm going to have to end it here. This was an excellent, brilliant conversation. Thank you so much for your generosity, sharing yourselves, and let's continue the conversation throughout the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.